Stand up.
Well, hello. How are you? Thank you very much for pressing play on today's show. I think you are going to like both of my guests. I have two great journalists. Of course, David Rothkopf is a regular here on the program. My conversation with him begins at 20 minutes into today's show. But I've also got Earl Stevens joining me because I really wanted to talk to him. I've been watching him on social media, reading his Substack enough already, and I really wanted to talk to somebody in Wisconsin. Earl is an old school print journalist. He is a very passionate guy, a really smart guy, and I loved our conversation. That begins at 48 minutes into today's show. But coming up, I've got your headlines, your sound bites, and more. Just wanted to check in real quick. I haven't really said much lately on the podcast, but I'm doing okay. I hope you're doing okay. I think I'm living with the same anxiety about what's happening in the world and in our country as many of you are, which is why I have to do this show, which is why I love to stay connected with so many of you. I've been hearing from a lot of you lately. I look forward to seeing you at our Thursday night hangout. You can always connect on the Discord platform, but reach out to me anytime you want. standupwithpete@gmail.com. or the myriad of other ways that there are to connect with people, but that's the best way to connect with me. One of the many things I love about the stand-up community is how much folks care about each other when they know about each other, when they know that something is going on. And one thing that a lot of folks know is that you're in the path of a hurricane or any other natural disasters, violent shootings, etc. Folks reach out to each other, which was the case yesterday when Hurricane Beryl made landfall in Texas. We've got listeners like Tina Winsett, Will Judy, Joel Bates, and I'm sure plenty of others, but those are the three that I know were going to be affected by that hurricane. Checked in with all three of them, they with each other and others, and yesterday I heard from all of them, asked Dr. Will Judy to send me a quick audio dispatch, and he did, and it's funny, and I love it. Here's yesterday morning how it sounded in his neck of the woods in Texas, near Houston.
Hey, Pete. Weather update from Houston Heights, which is central-ish Houston. This Beryl character is definitely punching above its weight. I don't know if is Beryl a male, female name, whatever. That wet hole of a eye is super angry, and we're getting the dirty part of it. It's super funky, but the crescendo is happening now. A little bit of a relative calm awaits, but that's the update from Houston. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Will, and I'm going to do more of that. So by all means, citizen reporting here on Stand Up. Now let's get to those headlines and sound bites from yesterday, the last 24 hours. I mentioned the weather. Let's just talk about the climate and how it affects the weather, of course. Earth's more than year-long streak of record-shattering hot months kept on simmering through June, according to European climate service Copernicus. There's hope that the planet will soon see an end to the record-setting part of the heat streak, but not the climate chaos that it comes with it, according to scientists. As a matter of fact, my friend Dr. Michael Mann's name was trending yesterday as a result of the climate issues and weather that reminds us about them constantly. The global temperature in June was record warm for the 13th straight month, and it marked the 12th straight month that the world was 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial times, Copernicus said in an early announcement yesterday. It's a stark warning that we are getting closer to this very important limit set by the Paris Agreement, senior climate scientist Nicholas Julian said in a interview. The global temperature continues to increase. It has at a rapid pace. So not good, and don't want to give you more anxiety. So I'm going to move on to some good news, which is that in Arkansas, the backers of a measure to allow voters the chance to loosen the state's near total abortion ban said that they submitted more than 100,000 signatures, more than enough to qualify for the November ballot. That's right. Abortion is going to be on the ballot in Arkansas. And good news in Kansas, where they're also trying to claw back and maintain women's reproductive rights. The Kansas Supreme Court reaffirmed abortion protections in the state's constitution, striking down Republican-backed laws that banned the common second semester abortion procedure and created additional licensing requirements for abortion clinics. So that is also good news. Oh, and wait, there's more good news. The latest January 6er being sentenced, a school board member actual member of the school board in Frederick County, Virginia, who's rejected calls to resign over his presence inside the Capitol on January 6th, pled guilty and was sentenced this week to 12 days in jail and 2 years of probation for a misdemeanor trespassing and disorderly conduct during the riot, which, by the way, shows the variance of sentences. Some people did a lot worse things than other people. They broke windows, they vandalized the building, they stole things, or even at, I guess, the worst, they injured and fought with law enforcement. They got heavier sentences than the guys who were just caught wandering around like, quote, tourists. But that guy's a school board member? Wow, I got to look into that community. They think my shit's bad over here. Boeing, the airplane manufacturer, agreed to plead guilty to a felony charge over 2 fatal 737 MAX crashes and pay nearly $500 million. So that, I don't know what to make of that story. Japanese currency, the yen, hit a nearly 4-decade low, threatening the country's largest military buildup in post-war history. Paramount and Skydance, two entertainment companies, agreed to a merger, making the tech scion David Ellison Hollywood's newest mogul. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated his position to a permanent ceasefire with Hamas as hopes were rising during negotiations. Columbia University removed 3 deans, saying texts they sent during a forum on Jewish issues, quote, touched on anti-Semitic issues. I think the worst news from yesterday, though, was the Russian missile strike, which destroyed Ukraine's largest children's hospital, part of a large-scale aerial bombardment that killed at least 38 people across the country. And, of course, the story that everybody in America and elsewhere is watching. I was on Australian television yesterday. The President of the United States is defiant. He told Democrats yesterday to challenge me. He issued a dare to high-ranking lawmakers were calling him to step aside. He told congressional Democrats in a letter that he was, quote, firmly committed to staying in the race. He called in the Morning Joe. I'll play you a little clip from that. He said he didn't care about any of the big names urging him to drop out of the race. He says, if any of these guys don't think I should run, they should run against me. Go ahead and announce for president. Challenge me at the convention. This is going to be a crucial week for President Biden's presidency. He's facing calls to drop out. They continue. He's hosting the 3-day 75th anniversary of the NATO summit in Washington beginning today. He's promised a solo news conference at the end of the week. And he also made a formal call to top donors. Since the debate in a 19-minute call today, the president repeated that he was staying in the race, said they needed to shift the focus of campaign away from him and on to Donald Trump. Also, people are talking about this the New York Times reported that a Parkinson's disease expert had visited the White House 8 times in the last 8 months, last summer through spring, and everybody's questioning that. But of course, same doctor went to the White House several times during the previous president's tenures in the White House, though we don't know who went in the Trump White House because they wouldn't let us, which is such a big deal and should be such a huge story. But many people are saying that President Biden just signed a bill to fight Parkinson's disease, and his spokeswoman yesterday said that he's not been tested specifically for or diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So looks like New York Times clickbait. As far as I can tell, we'll see if that story develops. Those are your headlines from yesterday. Now I've got some sound bites. Let's start with President Biden calling in to Morning Joe yesterday.
He's just a liar, and he hasn't done a damn thing since the debate. He's been riding around in a golf cart for 10 days, was down in Mar-a-Lago talking with his wealthy friend. I'm not running because of these guys, Joe. I'm running because, and you know me well enough to know this from the very beginning, I ran because I never bought on to the trickle-down economic theory. I never bought into the notion that we have to walk away from the rest of the world and cave to Putin or anybody else. I've never believed any of that, and I'm confident that's where the American people are. So what I did was I went out and I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any slippage at all. And with the average voter, I don't care what the millionaires think.
Yeah, he was talking for like 5 minutes. He was pretty pissed off. He sounded lucid to me. He sounded pretty good to me, but maybe others heard differently. Here is Hakeem Jeffries, the would-be Speaker of the House, if Democrats won and took over the House and President Biden wins. Well, it wouldn't matter if he won or not, but he wants to play his cards right. That's for damn sure. Here he is.
You support Joe Biden staying as your Democratic nominee?
Yes, I made clear the day after the debate publicly that I support President Joe Biden and the Democratic ticket. My position has not changed.
All right, Hakeem Jeffries standing strong with the president. And now over on Fox News, Jake Auchincloss, who's a congressman representing Massachusetts 4th District, he's a Democrat, was on with John Roberts, who tried to get him off of his talking point, but he nailed it. He went right back and went after Donald Trump. This is exactly what any Democrat should be doing pretty much everywhere, as boring as it might seem.
The Biden campaign strategy was to talk about Donald Trump and make this election all about Donald Trump. But now this election has become all about Joe Biden. Is that an election he can win?
14 million Democratic primary voters think he can win it, and the Democratic Party should walk humbly before it contravenes the will of our voters. Unlike the Republican Party, we respect free and fair elections, and what unifies us as a party is knowing that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. And my challenge to my Republican colleagues is, why aren't you having this same public and painful conversation about your nominee? Because on that debate stage, Donald Trump lied every 90 seconds. He yet again refused to say he would accept election results when the last time around police officers died in the line of duty because he tried to incite an insurrection. He's trying to politicize Social Security. He's trying to hand Ukraine back over to Russia. How much more do House Republicans need to hear before they're willing to do the right thing?
All right. There you go. Well done, Congressman. And now let's go to the White House press briefing room yesterday, where reporters were real dicks to the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, specifically CBS's Ed O'Keefe. They all thought that the White House was lying or being dishonest or not transparent about that story regarding the president's health and other stories around the president's health. I'll let you decide who's right about that, but this is what it sounded like yesterday.
That he gets every year that we provide to all of you.
That's a very basic, direct question.
Wait. Hold on. Wait a second.
Eight times, or at least once, in regards to the president specifically.
Hold on a second.
Not what you should be able to answer by this point.
Wait, no. No, wait a minute. Ed, please. A little respect here, please. So every year, around the president's physical examination, he sees a neurologist. That's 3 times, right? So I am telling you that he has seen a neurologist 3 times while he has been in this presidency. That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you that he has seen them 3 times. That is what I'm sharing with you, right? So every time he has a physical, he has had to see a neurologist. So that is answering that question.
No, it's not.
No, it is. It is. You're asking me. I also said to you, Ed, for security reasons, we cannot share names. We cannot share names.
We have to. Others he would have met with. You can share names in regards to if someone came here.
We cannot share names of specialists broadly, from a dermatologist to a neurologist. We cannot share names. There are security reasons. We have to protect. I understand that. I hear you.
Right there for anyone to see.
Ed, I hear you. I cannot from here confirm any of that because we have to keep their privacy. I think they would appreciate that too. We have to give them.
You shouldn't have the doctor.
We have to keep their privacy.
It is public information.
I hear you. Guys, hold on a second. There's no reason to go back and forth with me in this aggressive way.
Miffed around here about how information's been shared with the press corps around here.
What are you missed about? What are you missed
everything
about?
He just asked about.
And then every time I come back and I answer the question that you guys asked.
Correctly, you didn't have to come back and clean up.
I never answered the question incorrectly. That is not true. I was asked about a medical exam. I was asked about a physical. That was in the line of question that I answered.
All right, well, that's enough of that, and there's more to it. She later on scolds him and others for talking to her with disrespect, which I think is fair in my mind, the way I saw it. And a lot of reporters are trying to make a huge story out of the president's health. It is an absolutely important story, but I think there are more important stories, is what everybody is saying. Maybe you don't agree with me, but that's the way I'm viewing that, which is why I'm done pretty much talking about it here in the sound bites. We'll talk a little bit about it with both of my guests who have different opinions on it, but it's not most of what I'm doing, that's for sure. I thought this was interesting and important. Last night on Joy Reid, she had our friend Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett on to respond to her colleague in the House, Congressman Chip Roy, who you'll hear at the beginning of this clip, calling Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, a DEI hire, which, as Tim Wise told us yesterday, is what they say now instead of the N-word. Anyway, Joy Reid lets Jasmine Crockett let it rip. And I'm very much here for it.
At the end of the day, I don't think they'll go there. I don't think they can. They're in a box. They're in a box where they've got to choose between a mentally incompetent president and a DEI vice president, and they know that they're going to be facing a problem either way.
Now, I know that you all want to read a loser when a loser says a thing, so I'm just going to let you comment on what you think about those words.
Again, you know what? I want people to listen to them. If you just listen to what they say, it will tell you everything that you need to know. Number one, you can obviously see that he's ignorant as all get out. And number two, you can see that he wishes he had half the competency of Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't talk to me about what a DEI hire looks like, because we know that you have never, ever engaged in diversity, equity, or inclusion when it came to your office. So we know that you don't know anything about hiring diversity. But let me tell you one of the real facts about diversity in this country. We're missing out on trillions of dollars in GDP, and they can go and check the receipts if they want to, because we have the rogue governors coming out of the state of Texas that are anti-DEI. We've got the rogue governor in Florida and so forth. And so what they need to do is get over their incompetence and just try to get on our level and decide that they're going to compete and start to come up with actual policies instead of going after people because of how they look or how they were born. Instead, they need to focus on taking care of the American people, which means that you're going to take care of people other than just white folk. It means that you take care of brown, Hispanic, Asian, and everyone.
Yes, that feels good to hear Jasmine Crockett respond to that horrific racism from Chip Roy and anybody else who calls Kamala Harris a DEI hire. It's just disgusting. All right, moving on. Let's get to two more clips. This is Jim McGovern, who we love, Congressman Jim McGovern in the House. They are back on Capitol Hill. As of yesterday, they are having a hearing, and McGovern called out Republicans for their agenda items and priorities now that they've returned, or their lack of priorities.
And just days after July 4th, a day we celebrate actual freedom from tyranny, Republicans have brought up bills about freedom for refrigerators and dishwashers. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. They have no problem taking away the rights of living, breathing human beings, no problem depriving women of their reproductive rights, stripping away freedom from the LGBTQ community, hindering families who want IVF. None of those groups deserve freedom, according to the Republicans. But refrigerators, sign them up. Apparently, nothing says freedom to them quite like forcing their constituents to pay more on their electric bills. For the record, if somebody wants to keep a 50-year-old refrigerator, that's their right. Nobody's going to stop them. That's nuts. And it's not what this bill is about. This is about Republicans giving billion-dollar companies the freedom to cut corners when they make appliances, keeping all of our utility bills high and polluting the air and water while they're at it. I mean, that's what they are in favor of.
Yeah, Jim McGovern, let him have it. Good stuff, good stuff. And finally for you, I've got Ed Luce, who I think is a really smart analyst, commentator. He was on MSNBC yesterday. He often joins David Rothkopf over at Deep State Radio. He's a big part of their cast over there. I like what he had to say about French elections. I needed an explainer, and he had one.
Well, the French electorate had a whole week in this 2-round voting system to figure out tactical voting, and they did figure it out. Macron's candidates dropped out where they came third. The left candidates dropped out where they came third. They all agreed on one candidate to fight the far right, Le Pen's party, and it worked. Voters understand that system, and I think it is quite a good system because you have round one where people express their outrage or their preference. Round two, they have to think. And they have to face reality. What kind of government do we actually want? And the answer from 3/4 of French voters is not a neo-fascist government.
All right, there you go, Ed Luce. I'll talk more about that with David Rothkopf coming up after my conversation with my first guest today. I've got two guests joining me today. Yeah, I'm pumping it out for you this week, and In the time remaining between Election Day, I'm going to do as much as I can for you. I'll take a few days off, no doubt, but very excited about what I've got for you today. Again, David Rothkopf is awesome as always. He is coming up. But first, I've got Earl Stevens, who is a veteran journalist. He was a print journalist for like 30 years. He worked in Maine. He worked in Florida, up and down the East Coast, and in Europe, at newspapers all over the world. And I wanted to hear what he had to say about, well, a lot of things. And so we talked about all of the discussion around President Biden and him dropping out. He's been vociferously supporting the president online and on his Substack. So we did that. We also talked about Wisconsin, where he is from. The president was just there visiting, and obviously it's one of the most important states of this election. I asked him what we could do. He had some great advice. I love talking to him. I hope you subscribe to his Substack and follow him on social media, all of that, ways to connect to Earl Stevens and every other guest in today's show notes. Let's do it right now. There he is. Earl Stevens, welcome back. So great to see you. You have been on fire online with your Substack on social media, so I really wanted to get you on the podcast. Thank you.
Pete, I'm really glad to be here, man. I love you. I like your stuff, and I'm honored to be here, man.
Listen, let's just go back to debate night and talk about your thoughts that night, how you watched the debate and how you felt after the debate, to start with your kind of thinking on it.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've had to watch, to be honest with you. I felt like going into the debate that he just had to put out a C+, B- effort. No one's going to mistake Joe Biden for Barack Obama or Winston Churchill. He just had to do a solid debate. And it was hard to watch. Aside from the fact the other guy lied, I think documented one time every minute he was on the air.
Yeah. So we all felt probably similarly that night as you did, but you've seen more and have a deeper context in a lot of these situations than many of us. So that being said, when you woke up the next day and it's almost been 10 days since the debate, and it's been wild to watch the media feed. How have you evolved, if you have?
Yeah, that's what I should have said, too, is after that debate went off, I had a lot of quiet moments, and I sat very quietly for a while and thought about it.
That's no fun. You should react immediately and loudly with hard opinions on social media. Why be quiet?
Yeah, dude, I was watching. The other mistake I made was looking at Twitter. And seeing some accounts that I respect making damn fools of themselves.
Yeah.
That was really the hardest part, this thinking, holy cow, you're probably just taking your credibility, lighting it on fire and throwing it away right now. There's no way you can be thinking about this and giving it the proper weight, right? And so I slept a little and woke up the next day, and you write, and you're a creator, and I sat in front of my computer, and I swear I started typing in tongues. And I've often said, you don't know what you're thinking about something until you write about it.
Yeah.
And as I wrote, I acknowledged the poor debate performance. I said, this is still our guy, man. 40 plus years as a public servant. He's done a great job as a president. And one bad debate, we're going to just say enough. That's out there for people to read if they want. But it really clarified things for me. I'm with the guy, 100%.
So one of the issues around not having quick reactions about things is not knowing the legality of how things might work. And I still don't. I think I've read this thing about that if Joe Biden were to step down, Republicans would not allow any changes to be made through the courts, and they would win, and it would just make everything worse. I don't know the answer to that. If Joe Biden steps down now, says he's not going to run, and steps down now, Kamala Harris takes over. Republicans would stand in the way of her appointed vice president. You'd have a Christian nationalist, Mike Johnson, a heartbeat away from the White House. And I have no idea what would happen at the convention in terms of the delegates or what the media narrative would be. I know none of the answers to anything, and so I'm just confused and trying not to weigh hard and fast with an opinion. But I feel like a lot of smart people are without knowing the answers to those questions and more.
Yeah, I agree. I heard your spot. I think that you put David Jolly on. Maybe it was your show yesterday.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and like you, I'm thinking that might be true. Here's what I know, and here's what I bet. The Republicans will stop at nothing, absolutely nothing, to blow anything they can to smithereens. Yep. So take it seriously. Even if it isn't serious, take it seriously. They're a bad group of people, man.
Real bad. And they are fascists, meaning they'll win at any cost. They'll cheat to win. They'll steal. They'll hurt you. They'll do whatever they can, deep fakes to win at any cost, and they'll certainly use the courts. I'm often reminded.
Violence, Pete. It's almost as if we've just decided to say that's normal when they threaten violence. It's absurd.
What do you think of President Biden and the way that he's handled it and his team has handled it since the debate and how they're doing? He's obviously on Morning Joe today and everywhere else and saying he's not going anywhere, and he's kept that message wherever he's gone. What do you think of how it's been played out?
Yeah, I thought today was an A+, and it's about time. I thought today that Biden used the most powerful position in the world to make his case. And I think he sounded like a man who had a good night's sleep, cleared his head, and said, you know what, that's enough of this shit, damn it. He wrote a really good letter to Congress. I don't know if you read that or not today. It was convivial, strong, and in so many words, look, you can get on the bus or get run over by it. I've had enough. This past 10 days is enough. Right after the debate, I felt really bad for the guy. I felt awful that he felt like he needed to do that interview with Stephanopoulos. I think that interview could have been 5 minutes. I'm not going to beat up Stephanopoulos. I think he did a decent job of it. But after 5 or 6 minutes of asking the same question, what else do we have to hear? The guy's not going anywhere. He admitted he gave a shitty debate performance. Maybe we can move on and ask a few questions about Trump and who he's running against. But long way of saying, Pete, it was a tough few days for him. He worked through it. And the old axiom, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or words to that effect, I totally believe that to be the case right now. I think he's had a really good day today. A really good day.
He was just in your state of Wisconsin, that right, President Biden?
That's right. Yeah, he was in my town.
What town is that?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Madison, Wisconsin.
The capital of democracy, damn it.
Why is Madison, Wisconsin considered the capital of democracy?
I guess I've coined that phrase, but why that is so is because it's housed here in Dane County, which might be one of the bluest counties in the United States of America in a purple state. We elected Biden in 2020 to the tune of 220,000 to 78,000 in that 2020 election, if you can imagine. And Wisconsin, again, very purple state. We are ardent liberals, ornery liberals in this town, and we work damn hard. I want to thank Ben Wickler, our Wisconsin chair in this country. Biden called him when he visited Friday the best at his job in America.
He's pretty darn good, yeah.
He's right. Dude, there could be an election called in 4 hours, and we'd be flooding the polls right now.
So, story out of Wisconsin the other day, Wisconsin Supreme Court says ballot drop boxes can again be used. And I don't know what this is about, but it's important. It's very important for voting, for democracy, for free and fair election. Republicans try to make it hard to vote. Sometimes they shoot themselves in the foot with that as well. But what do you want to say about the Supreme Court, which Democrats regained thanks to Ben Wickler and a lot of activists there, right? And
here's what I want to say about it. It's 4-3 liberal right now. I can't say that enough. A year ago, during the elections that we're going to determine which way the Supreme Court went, Janet Protasevich beat the Trump lackey by 13 points. This is a swing state. We don't win elections here or lose elections by 13 points. And so I'd also say this to you, Pete. That's not going away. That's not a poll. That's not some story. Those are real hard numbers, and why I believe that Biden's going to flatten Trump up here again.
That's great to hear. I'm happy to hear that, and I'm sure others will be as well. But I wanted to ask you for sure, talk a little bit about what it's like to be in a swing state, a battleground state a purple state, as you call it. We're looking a lot at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I don't know what else you'd add in, but they got a lot of electoral votes in those states, of course. And those seem to be the ones that are being spent the most money on. So right now, Wisconsin, you've got Republicans pouring money, Democrats pouring money into that state. What's it like to live there with 119 days left before the most important election on the face of the earth ever?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here, man. I'm a Jersey guy. I've lived a lot of places, and I have ended up here in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know why, but I guess I have decided the reason is because if I can make a difference, and I can, and anybody can up here, as you say, win the biggest election ever in the history of everything, I can do it. To really answer your question, there's pressure because I feel like every minute I waste is a minute I waste. You can really make a difference in this town. It's a big, small town, right? And so when we have politicians in town, right now you could throw a rock anywhere and hit one. You have access to them and they will listen to you. So it's exciting as hell, pressurized as hell. But I like it, man. I like knowing that my vote and my work here can make a difference.
What is your focus there? Like I've thought a little bit about trying to go in those last couple weeks, especially when it's so vital, get in a van and go to one of these states, maybe Wisconsin. What would I do? What do you focus on? Who do you focus on?
The first thing is get the vote out. That's an obvious answer. We believe here that if we get the vote out, we'll win. And particularly in the two counties, in Milwaukee County and here in Dane County. And that's why that Dropbox issue is so important. We know Republicans have made it extraordinarily hard to fucking vote, just to vote. And so by having those drop boxes out, you can vote, seal it up, put it in that box, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about standing on lines on Election Day, horrendous thunderstorms, or whatever it is, right? We encourage you to vote. So that's the first thing you do. The other thing, I knock on doors as it gets closer. I will be out there canvassing. There's all kinds of really cool online gizmos now. I don't know if you've done any of this now, like where you can track who's voting what and where and how and tabulate all that. Like you used to have a clipboard and all that. Just focusing on making sure people are aware of what's going on and aware of the issues. And it sounds simplistic, but that's what it is. Calling, phone banking, writing postcards, all that.
How can they not be in Wisconsin? Is it just everywhere?
What's that, Pete? I'm sorry.
Just talk of the campaign, the election. Is it everywhere already, or does it start later? I'm thinking you must be inundated with television, radio, phone calls, internet. Yeah. Every single website you go on, there's an ad.
Yeah. Wisconsin Dems, WisDems is where I would encourage people to go, and they can get you busy on the phone if you want to. They can get you writing postcards, etc. I think you've got to have a bit of a sweet spot. You don't want to start too soon because you're going to drive voters crazy. All right. We heard, and you get this anyway. I will go out and canvass in September or something, and people say, can you just look? I know. All right. I get it. And most people are really cool about it. They're like, hey, thanks, man. We appreciate it and all that. But you do got to be a little careful, I think, about getting normal people too upset. I'm an ardent idiot. All I think about is this stuff, but you got to be careful about it.
Me too. Are there issues that resonate with different demographics that you think to talk to when you're talking to young people, older people, black folks, religious folks, whatever it might be?
I think the overriding issue continues to be a woman's right to choose.
Yeah.
I think that is the monster issue. It continues to be.
Yeah. How do you talk about, given your career and your life and what you've covered as a journalist, what you've seen as an American, how do you talk about the stakes and write about the stakes that are coming for this presidential election?
There isn't an adjective I won't use to amplify my writing. I have to laugh at it sometimes. I do write with kind of a flamethrower kind of style. I write.
Oh, I love it. I wish you would always do it.
I do. I want to grab you by your shirt and drag you and beat you up and everything I can to get you to understand how bloody important this is. I just can't amplify it enough, Pete, by everything, man. And so I feel really fortunate to have a forum, however small, to be able to put my voice out there and to give other people the opportunity to put their voices in the room and people just want to be heard, dude. This better than I do.
How do you talk to guys like us, white men of a certain age? It's really hard to. I haven't even had a conversation, much less an argument, with a Trump supporter in a really long time. Like, they just don't come my way or don't engage with me. I was just with a bunch of my high school buddies and everybody avoided it there. I don't know if there were any of them. There probably might have been a couple. But do you run into them in Wisconsin? Do you hear from them? Do you talk to them? Do you engage them?
I'll give you a really quick story. I know we're tight with time here, but I was knocking on doors for the midterms. And that's when we had Mandela Barnes running against Ron Johnson and our Governor Tony Eters, who did win. Anyway, Johnson won by hair. Anyway, I knocked on the door and a nice middle-aged woman answered. And I said, I'm Earl Stevens. I'm representing Wisconsin Democrats, and I'm just here to canvass, reminding her to vote. And this guy goes, who the fuck is at the door? And she goes, and this is what she says to me. Oh, no. And she walked away from me. And this guy came at me. He wanted to fight me. And what's scary about this is we know she voted for the Democrats. We only knock on Democrats and independent stores. We don't mess with Republicans. I don't know that a lot of people know that. We don't do that. We just want to get our people out.
Yep.
And this guy was so ugly and disgusting and mean. And I was sure after I was done, I was like pretty shook up by it. And I wondered if I should call the cops, because there was little doubt in my mind he was an abusive son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And he probably didn't realize his wife, girlfriend, whatever it was, voting for the Democrats. So that one has always stuck with me, man.
That is a really weird situation, and I hope that the guy doesn't know that's why you're there and isn't smart enough to know that's the reason.
He knew why I was there, and that was why I wondered if I shouldn't call the cops or something. I thought maybe that's crossing some grievous line. I don't know. It was a really disgusting situation. As far as running into those guys, I have old friends who vote for Trump. I just don't associate with them. I'm done talking to people like that. I've made the decision. They probably made the decision to be done talking with me, which is just fine. If I can get one person who is thinking about voting for Trump or whatever over, then we've done our jobs, right? So
yeah,
I'm just not going to waste my time with that kind of stuff.
Do you think people have turned even more away from him, or do you think he's somehow gained new supporters since the insurrection and the conviction, et cetera?
I'm of the opinion that he's going to get 41% no matter what or whatever it is. I actually think it's the other way. Maybe that's me being a romantic or whatever, but I know people who, put it this way, I know more people who voted for him who won't this time than I know who voted for Biden and won't this time. You know, take that for what it's worth. But no, I don't think he's increased his popularity at all. No.
How does Wisconsin have Senator Ron Johnson, who's one of the furthest? I call him a real conspiracy theory. The guy has really perpetuated all kinds of conspiracy theories. None is too crazy for him. And then you've got Tammy Baldwin, who's a very progressive Democrat, is quite popular, I believe. How does the state have these two? These are statewide elections. They're senators. You've got a pretty good governor, it would seem, who's a Democrat now. I don't get it. I don't get how Wisconsin elects Ron Johnson. I know there's a lot of rural, backcountry, back-thinking folks there. I guess it must be what explains it.
That's a fantastic question, man. And here's the best way I can answer it. And that is the power of the incumbency. It is really hard to knock out an incumbent, whatever. You look at the Senate, it is damn near impossible. And so you're right. Baldwin is beloved. And Baldwin does something that maybe a lot of people don't know. She runs hard all over the state. She doesn't just concentrate on Dane and Milwaukee. She's everywhere. And so people really respect Tammy. Johnson, we had Johnson beat in the midterms, and this is a true story, and polling. And the polling was showing Governor Evers, a Democrat you just referenced, up 4 to 6 points. He was looking like he was going to win. And the same polling had Mandela Barnes down by about 4 to 6 points to Johnson. And the DNC started pulling their money from the Barnes campaign and putting it elsewhere in the country. Barnes lost by less than 1%. I tell you, dude, we had Johnson on the ropes and we had him beat. And those polls that people throw all over the place are nothing but toxic bilge. They mean nothing. As you saw in Europe, I heard you talking about that yesterday in Europe, in France. And
polls don't vote. Polls don't vote. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so, yeah, that one is the most bitter election I can remember up here because we had that guy beat. And here's another one. You have not heard the last of Mandela Barnes. He is a really strong.
He was a real charismatic, likable guy. I was just thinking as you're talking about him, I wonder what he's up to, but I'm sure
he's around. You'll hear from him again.
Good.
He closed like a freaking freight train in that race. He had him beat. But
I'd love to talk to him. Maybe put us in touch because I'd love to interview him.
He's a great dude, man.
I'm sure. So final thoughts on the media. You're a journalist, an old print guy, and you're seeing what's happening certainly on television with the internet. Just a lot of mainstream, quote, liberal media outlets and pundits making a hard, terrified call. Everybody wanting the same thing. That Joe Biden's got to step down. Joe Biden is saying, listen, I'm listening to the voters. I'm listening to my heart, whatever. And as you said, he had a really good day and sounds like he's bouncing back. I feel like the conventional wisdom, Earl, is that if the polls really start to crater, he's got a few more days if he wants to reconsider. But what do you make of just the feeding frenzy and some of the news outlets like the New York Times who wrote an editorial for him to step down, much less the influential columnists and others?
It makes me sick. The New York Times really makes me sick. I believe they had that written before that debate was even over and just couldn't wait to send it. Again, we started this thing off about initial reactions. They went out so fast with that. How much thinking could there possibly have been? They wanted out for Biden. And here's the part I don't like saying now, because it's taken me a long time to grudgingly get to this point, because I still believe in good journalism. I believe in the craft, right? Even though there's damn little of it being done on a national level. I think that Trump is good for business. And I have come around to that. I have grudgingly come around to that, but he puts money in their pocket and they want him around. So the way the Times has comported themselves is absolutely disgusting. And I do think the Post also, they drag the inside the Beltway crowd along with them. And it becomes a feeding frenzy, right? There's a death watch. There's breaking, ridiculous shit. It starts getting floated out there. And they're not doing their jobs. They're supposed to be the level-headed ones. They're supposed to take a breath and break it down and slow down. Instead, they're reactionary.
What do you want to say? I forgot to ask you about the Supreme Court. I feel like I hadn't seen you writing much about it. I'm not sure how much you're thinking about it, writing about it. Maybe it's not your lane, but you must have thoughts on what happened, because before the debate, we thought that would continue to be the story. The immunity case, obviously the Chevron case, which is really impactful in terms of what agencies are allowed to regulate. Any thoughts on this court, which is seemingly run by fake Jesus?
Yeah. Yes. And I have written pretty extensively about it. Only 1 week ago, they told us we can have kings. That was just 1 week ago. Doesn't it feel like about 14 years ago now? Right? That was 1 week ago. We learned that we can have kings in this country. You would think that would be all that the New York Times would be talking about in places like that. That, not some shitty debate performance, is the story, man. Yeah, that's why I was talking to my brother about this morning. I said the good news is these news cycles are so fast that bad news is over fast. And the bad news is good news is over fast, right?
Yeah.
But really, dude, 1 week ago, man, and you would have thought, oh, that's ancient history.
Yeah, you say bad news is over fast, but when the Supreme Court makes a decision, that bad news is often just around the corner. It doesn't go into effect yet. So if it's an abortion ban or a ban on the EPA or FDA preventing chemicals from being in our water and air, that stuff is coming.
Yes.
That's bad news. And I really want to see the type of journalism. And I think it's going to be hard to make this issue sexy and interesting, but not that hard. We got to make people understand that more rights have been taken from more of us based on like the Chevron case, much of what the immunity case means for the future of America in this court. Like I'm looking for that journalism right now.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And just to correct myself a little, I guess I was talking about the bad news for the Biden campaign.
Yeah,
because everything.
Yeah,
you said everything there, man. I wrote briefly this morning in my message to my Substack subscribers, and it was one word: unify.
Yeah,
enough bullshit. Let's get behind the president because of the things you just said right there: environmental rights, women's rights, voters' rights. There's nothing more important than that. That is long-lasting damage that will be done to us if we don't, as Democrats, liberals, even middle-of-the-road conservatives, get together here and overwhelmingly elect Joe Biden.
So let me just read it. It's brief, and I'm very dramatic. Can I read your words?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll perform them. This is from dearlstevens.substack.com. Enough already, which I love, and everybody should subscribe to. Dear readers, this morning, President Joe Biden delivered the below letter to Congress. I encourage you to read it in its entirety. Please. It is respectful, forceful, and full of nothing but the truth. I know some of you don't believe this very good man should be the Democratic nominee, and you've made your concerns known. I promise you I've heard them, and I respect your opinions. It's obvious Joe Biden has heard your concerns, and he types, he is not blind to them. Either you believe he's listened to you, or you don't. Starting now, that no longer matters. He will be our nominee, and he must defeat the most dangerous man in the world in November. Every minute we waste attacking each other only helps Republicans. Women's rights, voting rights, protections to our environment, and the existence of democracy has lived and grown for 248 years, hang in the balance. If we unify, we will win. If we don't, we won't. It really is that simple. I say starting now, we fight as one. Respectfully, D. Earl Stevens. I stand and I cheer you, sir. Thank you for that. I love it.
Right, man. Thanks for reading that, Pete. I get fired up just hearing that.
Yeah. Last question is, I feel like you feel optimistic based on what you know of Wisconsin and the makeup there, and it being such an important state. Maybe that gives you optimism around Pennsylvania and Michigan, which are similar in many ways. Are you optimistic about November?
Yeah. One more. I'll give you one quick reason on that. Yes, I live here, and Joe Biden will win Wisconsin. I'm telling you right now, he's going to win Wisconsin. The other thing is, real quick story. During the midterms, on the night of the midterm elections, when we were supposed to get clobbered, I was at an event, and Ben Wickler, who I referenced earlier, Democratic Party chair, was up here at a gathering, and we were watching votes. And I walked up to him before the votes came in, and I said, Ben, what are the elections you're keeping your eye on, besides the Barnes-Johnson race and our governor's race here? And he said, I'm watching the governor's races in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin tonight. And I said, that's interesting. 3 battleground states. Guess what? We won overwhelmingly in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in the governor's races. And more than that, all 3 of those state Supreme Courts are liberal. In 2016, just the opposite. So the blue wall, buddy, is pretty strong right now. And we're not feeling overconfident. We're going to work like hell. But I do believe it will hold in November.
Really happy to hear you say that, and really happy to catch up with you. And I hope that we'll do it again a lot more before the election. Join me anytime you want. I love reading your words on your Substack, of course, following you on Twitter. It's been helpful and inspiring. Keep up the great work. Your work matters. Your voice matters. I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you, sir.
Pete, thanks a lot, and do the same. I love your show, and keep going, man.
Yeah, I will. That is D. Earl Stevens. Enough already. Check out his Substack. Thank you very much, sir, for joining me. That was awesome. I really appreciated that conversation. I hope that you'll go let him know that you heard him here on the show. He's got a big following on Twitter. He'll definitely see your mentions, and that'll be really important to us. All right. And I want to keep going here with the podcast, but reminder, I can't do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Get after it. If you haven't already, could really use those subscriptions. So sign up now. You can always pay more. It helps sustain this show. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Now let's get to David Rothkopf, who you can also support. Listen to him on Deep State Radio. Read him at the Daily Beast, and now at his own Substack, which he's just launched. It's real good. Need to know. And, of course, follow him on Twitter and all of that in the show notes to connect with him. I hope you go check it out. I learned so much from him all the time. We had another great conversation. I love this one. I always love it. Let's do it with Rothkopf. You've been busy. You've been Substacking. You've been podcasting. You've been playing tennis in the heat. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. I don't know. I think playing the tennis in the heat, I should offer a discount on the Substack for the next few days because I think it's fried my brain. But
what happens
I'll do the best I can.
If we lose you, who will step in and take over Need to Know? And
my version.
It's weird that you had that answer before I even finished the question.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Dave Headroom.
Lots to talk with you about. But before we get to the American presidential campaign, you've written about the UK elections. You're paying close attention to, talking about the French elections. But first of all, I think that everybody comparing America next, we're next to fight back the right and fascism. They're not conceding.
There are a few little flaws with that argument.
I feel like the main flaw is the way that they do elections in those countries, especially in France, the runoff and all of that. But what do you want to say about it?
No, look, the main flaw is the Democrats are in control, right? Wait, the right isn't in control here, but Biden was in the White House. The Democrats have controlled the Senate for the past 4 years. So if it's an anti-incumbent move, not good, right? So first of all, let's not make that analogy. Secondly, both of these elections were not exactly what they appeared to be. So in the case of the British election, while Labour won a lot of seats because they have a first past the post system of voting, and because people were voting technically, the percentage of Labour votes actually went down. They won the seats by smaller margins, and the percentage of votes that went to the far right, the nutty Nigel Farage Trumpy crowd, went way up. Now, they only got 4 seats in the parliament, but their percentage of votes went way up. So that's worrying. In the case of the French election, while the left won the most seats, and then Macron's party won the next most seats, and the right wing of Marine Le Pen got the third most seats, Marine Le Pen had a pretty strong showing. And the French system of government, their assembly, does not lend itself really well to coalitions. So what you're likely to get in France is gridlock for a protracted period of time. And they're prohibited by law from having another election for a year. We could end up with France not making a lot of progress over the course of the next year. So, yeah, that great outcomes. Bye-bye, Tories. Marine Le Pen, you're awful. We don't want you to be in power. Those are good things. But let's deal with them as they really are.
What about just going back to the UK election? What do you think of this Prime Minister Keir Starmer? People are talking about the foreign secretary. Anything you want to say about what they can do, this new leadership?
Well, they've done some things immediately. They got rid of this plan to send immigrants to Rwanda. They've reiterated that they're going to support Ukraine. Keir Starmer is hopping on a plane and come here for the NATO summit. He's very engaged, talked to Biden already. There was a kind of a rumor that went around on the Twitterverse that Keir Starmer, who is a human rights lawyer, who looks a little bit out of central casting, was like the Mark Darcy character in the Bridget Jones movies, and that the Mark Darcy character had actually been based on him. Now, that's not true, but he's very similar to that. He was an active, successful human rights lawyer for a long time before he became prime minister. He definitely wears his values on his sleeve and walks the walk and talks the talk both. And I think there's every reason to be optimistic that you're going to get a lot more sane, sensible policies on the environment, on healthcare, on and so forth. We'll see what happens on issues like Brexit.
I'm not sure what they can do about that now.
They can go back on their hands and knees. Please let us back in. We made a terrible mistake. It was one of the dumbest things that we've ever seen a government do, right? Really shot themselves in the foot. We'll see.
So you mentioned the NATO summit this week. What is this all about? What is taking place in America this week, and what will they be talking about? Because I know you and the rest of the world watching is outraged by this latest attack from Russia, missile attack on a children's hospital in Ukraine. The images coming out are pretty horrific. Obviously, they're talking about Ukraine at this NATO summit. How important is it?
Oh, look, NATO summit's very important. NATO is more important as an alliance than it's ever been. It's a bigger alliance. Clearly, there's a clear mission there. Clearly, they have a well-defined mission with regard to Ukraine and with regard to repelling Russian aggression more broadly across Europe. So those are all important issues, and that's the official agenda, right? But the sort of unofficial sort of sideline agenda of this whole thing is to commemorate 75 years of NATO as the world's most important alliance. And there's a question mark hanging over the whole thing. And that is, right now, for the first time in our history, the United States has two political parties, one that's pro-NATO, one that's anti-NATO, one that's anti-Putin, one that's pro-Putin. And if Donald Trump gets elected, he, the last time around, wanted to pull out of NATO, but now it's something that he has been very upfront about. And were the U.S. to pull out of NATO, wouldn't really be NATO anymore. Ukraine would lose, and Russia would start threatening the rest of Europe. And so the delegates, the people I've talked to are coming over here for this meeting, while they're having official discussions, they're really trying to gather intelligence. Could Biden lose? Could Trump win? And what that means is that they, like the media and the now hated, infamous Washington elites and pundits, will be watching Biden super closely to see whether he looks like a guy who can beat Trump.
They're going to be evaluating him as much as the rest of the country.
Except for them, it's existential, right? All Americans should think it's existential.
Yeah.
But if you're from Poland, or you're from Estonia, or Latvia, or Lithuania, or Moldova, or not the Moldova, but if you are from one of these countries that borders Russia, if Trump pulls out of NATO and says to Putin, go get it, you think we could have Russian troops in our country soon.
In the United States of America, you're saying?
No, in Europe. So what I'm saying is that the U.S. election is not an abstraction to the delegates at this event.
I didn't realize what you said at that point, and I didn't think you meant Red Dawn. So
no, we're not there yet, although having a pro-Putin president with a pro-Putin party is closer to Red Dawn than we've ever been.
Though this conflict has bled the military so much that their military have to be so weakened. But I've seen their economy.
Who's military?
The Russian military is so weak as a result of our support of Ukraine fighting them, that it makes their ability to invade any other country or conduct any other military action so much harder, I would imagine.
It makes it harder to some extent, although there are countries that are out there trying to help them around the sanctions. There are countries like the Indians. Modi was there just now providing them with oil. The Chinese are providing the support. The North Koreans are providing them with some support. The Iranians are. They're working their way around the sanctions. And secondly, if Putin were concerned about maintaining his army by traditional standards, he wouldn't be fighting the war he's fighting in Ukraine. And that suggests that he's willing to sacrifice a lot more people. That's how the Russians have fought wars in the past. And then on top of all of that, you have hybrid measures, sabotage, cyber, other kinds of things they can do in all of these countries, and that don't put troops on the line. So there's a lot going on, and that's without even getting into the unthinkable prospect of them using weapons of mass destruction.
Let's get to the latest on what is happening with the presidential campaign, the situation around President Biden. This morning, he was on Morning Joe. He's written a letter to Congress. He is very adamant that he is staying in the race, that he's running. But you've written several pieces, hypotheticals about what could be the Biden scenario. It terrifies big Democratic donors over at the Daily Beast. It's time to get used to the idea of President Kamala Harris also at the Beast. You're writing at your own Substack. Of course, need to know, tweeting about it. Have you changed? Has your opinion evolved on this day to day like many others?
I refuse to discuss this subject.
Oh, fair enough. Moving on.
No, I'm just kidding. The reality is, it is such a shit show out there.
Yeah.
That if you tweet anything, we really ought to think carefully about this. Immediately, there are hundreds of people on the Twitterverse, or at least in my case, they get hundreds of people on the Twitterverse who are like, do you hate America? Why are white men such idiots? Why are men such idiots? Why are elites such idiots? Why are pundits such idiots? Why we elected Joe in the primaries and we've got to back Joe and stuff.
Those are just my tweets. So what do you make?
Those are just you. That's just you. And the point is, look, I am in that group that thinks that the issue here is how do you beat Donald Trump? It's not who is our candidate. Loyalty to Joe Biden should not be an issue here. Winning should be the issue here. And on top of that, I think we have seen enough evidence that Biden might be impaired somewhat as a candidate, that we ought to evaluate it. He ought to demonstrate that's not going to be the case if we are going to have the fate of American democracy ride on him at the top of the ticket, particularly when there's some pretty good choices out there, despite, again, everything you read from the bullshit of the social media, which is Kamala Harris would be an excellent presidential candidate, and I'm happy to defend that point. But if you allow me a minute, some of those arguments are just hooey. Oh, Biden was elected in the primaries, and how dare you disenfranchise? There weren't fucking primaries. Nobody was running against him. The primaries were a complete sham. Or only elites and politicians care about this, not regular people. There was a poll a week ago that said 72% of Americans didn't think he was up to the job. So those Americans have some kind of right to be heard in all of this. It suggests it's a serious concern. It's not the concern that was held at the local meeting of pundits local 110. Do you remember Bullwinkle, Rocky Bullwinkle? Natasha and Boris would go to the meetings of the Villains, Thieves, and Scoundrels Union. And this would be like the Villains, Thieves, and Scoundrels Union. And I recognize Mr. Friedman for 5 minutes. And no.
Your friend Thomas Friedman, who is called for Biden to resign. E.J. Dionne of the Washington Post.
E.J. Dionne, Ed Luke. There are countless number of people who've done it. Here's why it's a legitimate conversation and why I think the whole thing, listen to the people on Twitter, is, and by the way, there's so many people on Twitter, and I'm not going to name their names, who are like, I hate pundits, who have been working for the past 10 years trying to be perceived as a pundit on Twitter. But now they're like, I fucking hate the pundits. Look.
Pundits hating pundits. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or wannabe pundits and influencers. It's really bad for the Democratic Party when the issue is beating Trump to attack itself. And that's my main concern. Whoever's the candidate, Democrats have got to be unified at the end of it. Now, there is this other issue, which is the president capable? And I'm going to say one thing here, just because it's between you, me, and your listeners. The idea that this issue all of a sudden came up after the debate is so stupid. And we've been talking about this for 4 years. When Biden ran, people said he's too old, and everybody was like, yeah, but he'll do one term and he'll pass it on. He's not. He hasn't lived up to that implicit bargain, which, by the way, he danced around while he was running for office. Furthermore, the reason that you saw this avalanche of pundit responses is because they have been keeping it in for the past 3.5 years, and they haven't been bringing it up because they thought, look, we got to beat Trump, and they were weighing the whole time. What's the merits of discussing this versus the merits of beating Trump? And then they saw this debate, and then they said, holy mackerel, we have made a mistake. We should not have kept this in for the past 3.5 years. And I would implore people, before you go hating on your favorite columnist or whoever is offering these alternative points of view, ask yourself, is the person who's offering this opinion someone who has had prolonged exposure to the president up close or to people around the president up close? And because the reality is a lot of these people who've written these things have been in the room with Biden frequently, have seen problems frequently.
Right.
And just give them some credence. If you don't agree with them after you give them credence, fine. At the end of the day, we all have to get together and work with each other, though. And so a good place to begin that, and you'll forgive me for sounding Pollyanna-ish here, is a little bit of respect for each other. Try to hear each other.
You'll get none from me. But I do want to ask you one more question.
Why do I keep coming back here?
While I have you here for free. Which is the concern about the legality of putting someone else on the ballot. David Jolly brought this up on MSNBC yesterday, and I don't know about it. But if Joe Biden said, yep, I'm stepping down either now or I'm not running again, Republicans would do everything in their power to make sure that nobody else's name gets on the ballot, thus sowing a lot of confusion and doubt. Yeah. I don't know how true that is, but that gives me a lot of concern.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that gives you a lot of concern. But the reality is that the things they've said, like deadlines will pass in Michigan and Wisconsin, it's not true.
Oh.
Okay, it's just not true. Secondly, what happens if the president dies or is incapacitated? The nominee dies or is incapacitated. Yeah. That's always been anticipated.
Yeah.
It goes to the vice president after the president is chosen as the candidate. If there's somebody on the ticket, either person can use the funds, either person can run on the ticket. There's plenty of sort of legal background to make you think certainly that Biden could hand it over to the vice president. Now, might there be some court cases? Maybe. The Republicans, even with having a lot of the court system stacked in their favor, lost 66 different cases the last time around. And I just don't think that's a legitimate issue here. If you do, let's do the research and let's have the conversation. I personally think Biden's going to survive this. I think he's going to be the candidate. And that gets me to the last point that you made, which is the scenario that haunts everybody. I've talked to people in the Democratic Party close to the president, among his most committed supporters for decades. Their scenario is not, oh, can Joe Biden come back from this bad performance and be strong up until the convention. The scenario that worries them is that on October 23rd, Biden slips and falls.
Right.
Gets a bad cold. Gets COVID. Has to be off the campaign trail for a week. So, something happens. And all of a sudden, the only story for the last 2 weeks of this campaign is, see, we told you Biden wasn't up to this. And that's not something that anybody can rule out. And so it's something that everybody has got to think through. What would happen in that case? Is it our best bet when we have our existence of democracy at stake to pick a guy who is tied in the polls with the worst human being who ever lived, despite having a very good track record as president, and who is the oldest candidate we've ever had, from whom we have seen certain behavior that will cause some voters to vote against him or vote with their feet and not show up. And so long as you have that honest discussion, and then you say, nope, Biden's the guy for me, fine. Great. And let's all vow that the day after this is resolved once and for all, we're voting for Biden or we're voting for whoever the candidate is. But Jesus Christ, the stakes are too high here.
Do you think there's any chance that if Biden were to not run, there would be anybody else but Kamala Harris?
No.
Right.
I don't. I think there'd be a lot of people who'd say it, and I have some friends who are circulating a memo, like a bunch of donors and big mucky mucks in the party, saying, let's have an open convention, we'll have a mini campaign, we'll go in there. And there's some merit to that argument, by the way. We talked about it on my podcast. One of the things is, and this would blow Donald Trump's mind, so it is appealing. But if the Democrats said, no, we're going to have a mini campaign and an open convention, and at the end of August, we'll decide, that'd be the only story for the next 2 months. Nobody's going to hear from Donald Trump during that period. He is going to be off the front pages. And there's some merit to that. There's some merit to dominating the conversation for a couple of months, getting a little bit of free publicity.
And unfortunately, that is the end of my interview with David Rothkopf, because I just didn't like that answer. No, we had an issue with the internet, and neither one of us could figure out what it was, and it was almost wrapped anyway, so I just took what I could and left it all there for you. Sorry for that abrupt ending, but hope you appreciated everything he had to say, and it offered you a good perspective and a different one a little bit from D. Earl Stevens and others somewhere in between on the question about President Biden. And I hope that you liked it. That's all. That's why I do it, because we learn and live and laugh together every day here through the show, through each other, and building this community around the podcast and everything that comes with it. So sign up now if you haven't to be a part of our community. I look forward to seeing you at our hangout this Thursday night. Might have some special guests. Who do you want to hear or see? You let me know. All right, you bumblebees. Sorry about cutting off John Carroll's music yesterday. Apparently I did that. I will not make that mistake again. JohnCarroll.org. Go buy this song. Support him. He writes all the music for the show. And that's all I've got for you.
Open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand